Good evening. This is Sandy Shellis with Environmental Coffeehouse, and tonight we're gonna talk about abrupt climate change, and we're going to talk about the lawsuit by the kids that are suing Trump, and we're going to talk about tornadoes, and we're going to talk about my own experience, and I'm going to talk about something I've been thinking about lately that is, since the other day, that actually was like an epiphany on my mind. And it was like, well, if those kids can sue, why can't I? For the tornado that just went through my yard. Why can't I sue on behalf of my friends, my neighbors, and where I live? So it's really been a thought on my mind, not for money, but to think about what we could do with this little grassroots effort to say that this is not normal. What happened in New York State, what happened where I live, is we had a tornado. And a lot of people are probably, already know. I've talked about it ad nauseum. Share it if you want. I'm glad my friends are joining. I can see people that are joining. Of course, I'm on this Be Live, and I'm going to start with an article. Of course, I always start with reading things, and this is from one I really like, and it's robertscribbler.com. And I like this Robert Scribbler. I'm sorry I'm moving around a lot. I kind of hurt from all the work I'm doing at the house, being that my husband has come home, and I'm a nurse and I'm a cleaner and I'm doing everything, and I am hurting. But I'm going to say hello to my friends, Marcia and Kim, and I can see people who joined over there on a different screen. But I really think this is a really good topic, and I'm going to start with this article because I really feel like, why can't I get an environmental lawyer and sue for the destruction in my backyard that's caused by climate change because we don't get freaking tornadoes, and bring this to the public attention and wake them up that are just sitting back and saying, oh, it's okay that Erie County Fairgrounds was destroyed by a tornado. It's okay that they don't even know about my house. I wasn't even home. That an Amish sawmill was destroyed by tornadoes. That we have 9 tornadoes in this county every, maybe in 35 years. So I'm going to start with this. And this is a good article. And hi, Marcia. So 100 fossil fuel companies responsible for 71% of carbon emissions since 1988. And they're being sued for it. That is where I got some of my idea tonight. But this is something that's been going on for a couple of days. According to research from the Carbon Disclosure Project since 1988, 100 fossil fuel producers have been responsible for 635 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions. This total represents 71% of human carbon emissions that have occurred over the past 29 years. Companies involved in this massive carbon emission included such giants as ExxonMobil, Shell, BHP Billiton, and Gazprom. The report also found that these 100 companies were responsible for fully 52% of all emissions since the Industrial Revolution began in 1751. So no wonder why freak shit's happening like tornadoes in my neighborhood. It's really actually the fossil fuel industry's fault. And we should have been off fossil fuels 30 years ago. And I knew this then. When Jacques Cousteau was doing the television show, and I would watch, and he would tell tell people that we had to stop what we were doing back then, and we didn't. So report authors went on to point out that this relatively small group of companies is likely to have an outsized influence on responses to climate change. Hopefully hopefully adding that positive action by such corporations could produce significant positive change. However, historically, such companies have tended to fight against global climate treaties, misinform the public, and on the dangers related to human-caused climate change, and work to delay responses to climate change within their host nations. Due to this past bad economic actor behavior, combined with rising climate change-related damage, these corporations are also exposed to what may well be a historic and unprecedented corporate liability. And you know what? I'm going to find somebody to work with. It's not like I don't have enough to do. And I'm not looking for financial gain. But I wonder if there is somebody out there that wants to work with me because of what happened in my yard, decimated, old growth trees. We moved here thinking there's no tornadoes, it's safe, and my yard's decimated. And the videos I put up, so they're up there. But it's just led me to think about all this. If those kids could all sue for not having a future because of climate change, well, why can't I get something like this together, right? And get a class action or get some kind of lawsuit going for the tornadoes in our state that are directly caused by actions that these companies did 20 and 30 years ago that are causing the abrupt climate change we're seeing now. That's touched me. That's touching millions. And we're going to go on to that. So if you were born in 2015, the estimate for your lifetime lost wealth from climate change, according to this organization, DEMOS, and I went and looked at it, pretty interesting, they had some research on there, is between $581,000 and $764,000. I don't know if you see that fly. I had a cluster fly problem, outbreak. Those we could live without. And I'm going to get it. Okay, so with 100 companies responsible for 50% of that loss, it's pretty obvious that liability will become a more and more serious impact as climate harms ramp up throughout the coming decades. Hi, Kat. A far-reaching liability that could well include various harms related to climate change coming from such diverse dangers as sea level rise and loss of water and food security, loss of habitability due to heat, and damage to valuable national resources like forests, glaciers, and reefs. And haven't we been talking about these? What has Environmental Coffeehouse been doing but showing all of this stuff happening? But when it touches me, when it touches people I know, it just makes it all the more serious. And I know, Kim, you said you had a tornado in your Minnesota hometown last night. I don't know about Minnesota and the regularities of tornadoes, but it would probably be something good to research, right? So already a number of lawsuits are testing the legal waters in this regard. For example, in California this week, let's see, Imperial Beach, San Mateo, and Marin counties are filing lawsuits, okay, to get some of the world's largest fossil fuel producers to pay for sea level rise related to damages. And if Imperial Beach and the two counties prevail, large corporations like Chevron, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, BP, and Royal Dutch Shell could be liable for billions of dollars in mitigation costs and punitive damages in coming decades, even as direct damages from climate change ramp up. Okay? So, according to the San Diego Tribune, attorneys for the plaintiffs said they modeled their legal tactics after past efforts to hold accountable cigarette businesses and makers of, the cancer-causing agents and gas and chemical companies that used methyl tertiary butyl ether, a gasoline additive that has contaminated groundwater across the country. And though not all liability-related lawsuits against major tobacco and chemical companies were successful, those that stuck resulted in major awards, even as the lawsuits themselves produced a very harmful public relations impact. Okay, so we're going to talk about this for a minute. So that's a financial thing of suing these companies. They don't want to be sued, but I need some scientific evidence, which we have to work on. I need a scientist. I don't have a James Hansen. Maybe Dr. Guy would work with me. Maybe Paul Beckwith would work with me. Why the hell are we having tornadoes in Western New York? Why the hell is my property decimated? Why are all my old growth trees ruined? So here I'm going to read to you actually what a tornado is. Let's read the definition of a tornado. Tornadoes are formed by a combination of atmospheric instability and wind shear. Instability occurs when warm, moist air is wedged under drier, cooler air aloft. This warm air rises, causing the intense updrafts and downdrafts seen in strong thunderstorms, the incubators of tornadoes. Wind shear refers to changes in wind direction and speed at different elevations in the atmosphere. The combination of instability and wind shear forms the rotating column of air that we associate with a tornado. So, can it be that the greenhouse gases that have been farted out into our environment for the last how many years? We read from the 1700s, the industrial era, but most notably the last 40 and 50 years, really. Could that be what is causing these things locally? We see a million articles about stuff happening all over the world. And my God, I watched Paul's latest video, Paul Beckwith, and he's talking about the mass animal deaths all over the world. Mass animal deaths. I can't even watch without getting emotional. I can't even stand it. But I'm thinking that at least maybe I can wake up my little part of the world here and tell these people that this is not normal. This is climate change, and this was abrupt climate change. This was not expected. Who in the hell ever expects a tornado? My husband and I were in the hospital laughing about it. And yep, Steve, we ain't seen nothing yet. That's what Steve says. We ain't seen nothing yet. But I am looking. And if anybody knows somebody that might want to work with me, an environmental attorney that may want to say, hey, listen, we're going to do some wake-up calls. Okay? We're going to do some wake-up calls. See, even Joanne thinks it's a great idea. I do too. I've developed it over the last few days, reading a lot of other things when I have time. I don't really have time right now. I don't. But I will do this. I think I'm crazy enough to do it, or at least make a stink enough about it. You know, my backyard, my acreage is getting worked on. My brother-in-law, my family. But what if I didn't have any of that to help us? What if I didn't have that? I've already told you that the insurance companies don't give a shit. They don't pay for any property damage. They don't consider a tree something that is valuable. They don't consider trees to be compensatory items in a lawsuit against an insurance company claim. Okay. They don't care. They don't care. Okay. Mother Nature, right? So then, I do want to talk a little bit about the trial date. There was an article with Inside Climate News. Now, I really don't know exactly what is going on with this, but a federal judge had set a trial for the landmark lawsuit brought about by 21 children and young adults over the U.S. government's alleged failure to rein in fossil fuel development and address climate change. Well, I want to do the same thing, but maybe with a different population. My Amish neighbor's sawmill was decimated, ruined. That's what the news showed. They didn't show my house. I wasn't home to make a stink. I wasn't home. I was in the hospital with a husband that had a motorcycle accident who lived. But I wasn't home to make a stink, but I'm making a stink now. I called the town and they were useless, really, basically. So this lawsuit with the kids, the trial will start February 5th, 2018. Now, I hope that's still the same. That's in Eugene, Oregon. It was filed in 2015. Well, what else do I have to do? I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well wait for a lawsuit that might actually wake up people, an abrupt climate change lawsuit. Because I'll tell you what, I don't know what the hell is waking up the masses. The guy from the town was taking the trees down off the road, and I made him walk into my property. I made him walk into my property so he could see just what happened. His eyes were wide open. I don't think they knew the extent. It's like the freaking thing went and sat on my property, okay? So I know you're all here for me. I love you all. I'm okay. I know I did some whiny live streams on my own page, but I'm okay. I'm strong. I got a great family. And you know what? It's not about me. It is not about me, okay? This is about my Amish neighbors. This is about the Erie County Fairgrounds. This is about what the heck is causing these tornadoes. You know, I read to you the description. We never used to get these kind of, what were we known for in Western New York? Buffalo. Snow, okay? Snow. That's what we're known for. Are we even known for snow anymore? I don't even know. I really don't, because we sure as shit don't get the snow we used to get when I moved to Western New York. So I found this other article. I find reading articles is good, and it helps because a lot of times I forget things, and it's difficult. Let's just see what a couple of people are saying while I watch these stupid cluster flies fly around this. Kat says, yeah, a tree is a loss of life. And that loss of life devastated me. But it's not right. And the fossil fuel industry, in my opinion, is directly related to the weather that we are having. Of course, it's going on all over the world. Here's an article called, it was in Culture and Politics, and I thought it was interesting. Climate Change, Truth, Deception, and Denial. Guy's name is Daniel Margrain. The 2015 National Security Strategy sets out the Tier 1 threats faced by the UK. These are, I'm trying to get this comfortable for me, but these are international terrorism, cybercrime, and climate change. You see, these are driving me nuts. They're becoming more frequent and unpredictable. 9 days before the world's largest populated city, Shanghai, experienced its hottest day in recorded history, the planet's biggest iceberg, Larsen C, broke away from the Antarctic ice shelf. Well, we all know about this. This followed the collapse of more northerly Larsen A ice shelf in 1995 and Larsen B in 2002. Who's been following this? I don't know if I was following this in 1995, but I sure as hell started in 2002, knew what was going on. Climate change is likely to be contributing to the altering of wind patterns and weather throughout the world. With temperatures in the Arctic rising at twice the rate of the planet as a whole, the sea ice area is already below what would have been a yearly low in the 1980s, with 2 months still left in the melt season. The comparison highlighted in there's a graphic here, but I'm going to tell you, there's no way you're going to be able, well, maybe you can. There's a graphic. Can you see it? Well, the graphic, it was showing the clear long-term decline of Arctic ice fueled by global rise in heat-trapping greenhouse gases. The dramatic shrinkage of sea ice over the past few decades is driving major changes, from the loss of crucial Arctic habitat to the potential influences of weather patterns around the world. And you know I talk about this because I am upset and obsessed, and I wanted to go to Greenland. I want to go to sea. But now things are postponed. Things are a lot different right now. They really are. Kim says she was following Monsanto in 1995. Very cool, Kim. Okay, let's go back to this because I think it's a pretty good one. So Arctic sea ice reflects incoming solar rays back to space, helping to regulate the planet's temperature. But as human activities have released more and more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the ensuing warming has caused ice to melt. That melt means more of the ocean is open and absorbs solar energy, raising temperatures more and driving melt in a vicious cycle. The potential consequences are, at some point, possibly rapidly, on a time scale of years and decades, and we've been hearing this. Raised sea levels could submerge areas that are now land, wiping out whole states from Bangladesh to the Netherlands and destroying major world cities, including New York and London. And those people down there, if they don't wake up, they better not come up here, because they will. That's what'll happen. Shit's going to hit the fan, and they're going to they're going to be climate refugees, basically. The rich ones will be able to buy the property up here. I'm going to have to surround my property with a 10-foot fence a la Donald Trump. Oh my gosh. Yes, Trevor said lots of forest fires in British Columbia and a lot more than average. Absolutely. Been reading about that. The ridiculous heat in China. Oh, animals dying from it. Camels are dying. They're dying from the heat. They're used to heat. Boy. So the poor nations of the developing world are particularly vulnerable. These are places where millions live on the edge, directly impacted by climate change, dealing with the effects from cyclones, and droughts to erosion and floods. Tuvalu near Fiji and other island nations, for example, are concerned that rising sea levels will wipe out their whole country right off the map. The concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the most important, which is carbon dioxide, is the cause of global warming, which leads to the kind of destruction outlined. The gases act as a blanket trapping the sun's heat, and I tell you, I'm going to sue the living shit out of the fossil fuel industry if I get a good environmental lawyer that believes in me and a scientist that will work with me. I don't think I'm nuts. I think I need to do something. The gases act as that blanket, and the main source of the extra carbon dioxide is the burning of fossil fuels such as coal, oil, gas in power stations and in internal combustion engines. And we could have had different things 30 years ago. We could have had it. The fossil fuel industry bought off patents. God knows what they did. They probably offed people. I don't know if that investigation's been done. And I don't know if I'm the person to do it. Deforestation, which accounts for more than 10% of the global carbon dioxide emission, also plays a role in driving climate change. Dense tropical forests are critical to keeping climate stable, and because they suck up large amounts of human carbon pollution from the atmosphere, storing it in tree leaves, trunks, leaves, and roots and soil. I wonder, besides the rocky landscape that my property is, why were these tornadoes, this tornado that dropped on my property, able to take up 10 to 12 foot base trees on my property? Why? So the greenhouse gases, there's a new, according to a new study, a chunk of the world's forests, the size of Mississippi was decimated in 2015 because of wildfire and logging and expanding palm oil plantations. We know this, but does the common person know any of this? Believe me, when I was at that hospital with my husband, I talked to everyone. The clerks in the cafeteria. I gave out the environmental coffeehouse card everywhere, talking about everything I could possibly talk about with people that looked at me and said, wow, I didn't know that. Wow, I'm not registered to vote. Wow, I'm 32. I have 4 kids by 3 different guys. I said, you need to get involved in politics. Do you think those 4 kids deserve anything? You know, do you think maybe a mom that understands what's going on? She's a beautiful girl, though. I did like her. We both liked her. We both talked to her quite a bit. So about 49 million acres of forest disappeared worldwide in 2015, mainly in North America and the tropics, putting the year's global deforestation level at its second highest point since data gathering began in 2001. In all, the globe lost 47% more forested land in 2015 than it did 16 years ago. Across from me is very flat land. I don't know if 20 years ago it was deforested and not regrown. Something for me to research, huh? That's possibly why part of this happened. We don't know, but I do have a little quick one I'm going to tell you after this about somebody that experienced it right outside of my house firsthand, which I didn't know about till today. So we have so we talked about this, the greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide. It's all been over the last few decades, like I said. Beyond question, the general effect of heating up a system like the Earth's climate will be an increase in extreme weather events of the kind witnessed in recent months in countries like Spain, Iran, Pakistan, and Western New York. Tornadoes. The consequences of global warming are already evident. The science informs us that even if all greenhouse gas emissions were halted tomorrow, global temperatures are likely to rise by another half a degree Celsius, and sea levels could be 2 or 3 times as great as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC bullshit artists, have predicted by 2100. You think that they don't get something from the fossil fuel industry? You're crazy. Okay. Humans, nobody is not susceptible to greed. Even me. But I've worked on it, and I'm not like that. And I don't go and buy bullshit anymore. The only thing that comes that I buy and that I hate to say in a truck is cat food and cat litter because it's too heavy for me to carry. My UPS guy carries it in. And I do feel bad about it. But I buy everything locally other than that. So many people don't realize that we are committed right now to a significant amount of global warming and sea level rise because of the greenhouse gases we've already put into the atmosphere. A paper from 2008 showed that climate change is largely irreversible for 1,000 years after emissions stop. And you wonder, why maybe I just don't want to do this? I do. Floods and water quality problems are likely to be amplified by climate change in most regions of the U.S., which we see. For example, while major incidences involving storms, heat waves, like it's 105 in Richmond, Virginia, where my friend lives, droughts, floods, and hurricanes across the planet, with all the human and social consequences that bring, will be among the major challenges facing us as humanity, as human beings. But far from halting all carbon dioxide emissions, the world's major states and corporations are pumping out ever increasing amounts. You know, I couldn't have wrote this article any better. With little meaningful sign that global warming will not exceed 2 degrees Celsius, which is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels, the primary goal of the Paris Climate Agreement that our moron 45 is pulling us out of. President Moron. This is a direct correlation between industrialization, what the Western world calls development, and carbon emission. All this growth. It's like, I'm driving around near the hospital the other day, and I see beautiful farmland, and what do I see? All kinds of condos, and strip malls and condos being built there. Who are they for? Why can't things just be left? Why can't we just fix what we have? I wanted to do a live stream from one of those condo places. It was just awful. I mean, why can't people buy a house in a regular neighborhood? Stop having kids, then we won't have to worry about this. 75% of the historical carbon emissions have been produced by only 20% of the world's population. United States, China, Europe. The geographical irony to this is that the effects of climate change are felt overwhelmingly in the developing world and parts of the world that are least responsible for creating the crisis. Sub-Saharan Africa. 70 to 80% of the effects of climate change are being felt in the developing world. So there is an inverse relationship between cause and effect. Continued global warming will at some point have large-scale, relatively sudden, and unpredicted, right? Just like this stupid tornado on global rainfall, wind, and temperature, on the related ocean water and heat circulation patterns. The details of these shifts are inherently unpredictable, but that they will occur with dramatic impact on global and local climate, agriculture, and much else, we already know it. Changing climate will also see shifts in the global distribution of disease-carrying insects, with potentially huge impacts on human health. And I've got a few of those goddamn things right in this room, and I've been squishing them with my fingers because they're cluster flies. I don't know where the hell they came from. The house is closed off. I really don't. I think it was a bunch of flowers I had in the house, and now I have like these stupid cluster flies, and usually my cats run around getting them, but I have one little kitten that's terrorizing the rest of my cats, and nobody wants to do anything. Let's see. So we said that, and huge impacts on human health. The consequences of all these effects could be catastrophic, causing untold misery and immense social upheaval, with the threat to the future viability of human possibility on the planet, which is a real possibility. First, they're going to take health insurance away, and half of us are going to die in the United States from that. Okay. So the realities and potential consequences posed by runaway climate change and the science underpinning it is clear. And yet the translation of the science into affirmative action, the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions by 60% by 2050, if we're alive by then, required to combat it, is not happening. The international framework by which countries are legally bound to cut CO2 emissions is the Kyoto Protocol. I've talked about that, which came into effect in February 2005. By November 2009, 187 states had signed and ratified the protocol. Its centerpiece was the general commitment by signatories to cut carbon dioxide emissions by 5.2% from their 1990 levels by 2012. Let me ask you guys a question. If you had access to more things than just a Prius, if you had access to battery-powered pickup trucks and lawnmowers that would do a place like mine, and more solar and more wind and all that, wouldn't you pick that over a fossil fuel piece of crap? I would, but there isn't the choice like we want. Other countries are going towards it. 2040, they're going to ban all gasoline in Germany. While by 2040, we're going to be choking so bad that we're going to be just locking ourselves into, if we're lucky to have air conditioning, or sitting in a car with air conditioning because we can't freaking breathe. A major problem is that the state responsible for more carbon dioxide emissions than any other, the arrogant United States, where I happen to live, with a quarter of all global emissions, refused to sign the Kyoto Agreement or any other international agreement on climate change, and that was not even 45. Remember who that was. But that is not the only thing wrong with Kyoto. All the fanfare around the deal is reminiscent of Hans Christian Andersen's tale of the Emperor's New Clothes. It's utterly worthless. The cuts in carbon dioxide emissions envisioned under Kyoto have done nothing significant to halt climate change. The European Union claims to be leading the rest of the world on the issue, yet when its governments met during the time of Kyoto's implementation in 2005, they too refused to set any post-2012 targets for emission cuts at all because they were all making money off the fossil fuel industry. And the car industry was selling us a load of bull. So the catalyst for even greater fanfare was probably the Copenhagen conference in December 2009. What emerged from the debacle was the realization that the global warming the rich world is largely responsible for and will continue to be disproportionately paid for by the poor nations in the globe, in the South. The politicians failed to deliver on activists' demands, which include large emissions cuts. Haven't we been asking for this stuff, right? The payment of ecological debt to climate victims, and the decommissioning of carbon markets. Now, I had been involved in looking at what the climate, not the tax, it was the climate fee, and fossil fuel industry would be having to pay based on how much carbon they emitted at the, getting out there, right out into the atmosphere basis at, when we use it. And that hasn't really gone that far. That was Citizens Climate Lobby, and people were equating that with the Republicans and a tax and all this other crap. And it really wasn't a terrible idea. And I do know the people around here that are in that, and they're really still trying very hard. They are. So Kyoto and all those other things, no binding agreement was forthcoming, so it was business as usual, and we all just went on with it because I did. Okay, I had a 4-cylinder Escape for a long time because I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't buy a Prius. I bought an Escape. The fault for this can be laid fairly and squarely with the rich world who sidelined the developing world from discussions from the beginning. Thus, the limitations of a non-transparent decision-making process, which granted a disproportionate amount of leverage to the former, principally the U.S., was brought to bear on the conference from the outset. As the Indian environmentalist and activist Sunita Narain put it, the breakdown in negotiations happened because basically the United States wants to dismantle the Kyoto Protocol. They want to dismantle the Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is based on the notion of equity, and replace it with a completely different multilateral system designed to suit their interests. And we're all such idiots. Okay, maybe I'm being a little emotional. So many of us were not awake. We weren't. We were consumers, and we were meat eaters, and we were contributing because we didn't know any better, because our government didn't help us, because even the companies out there that could have helped us didn't, and because the fossil fuel basically industries own us and have everyone by the proverbial balls, and we know it. So this much was apparent to the discerning viewer. In this regard, it was clear the rich were motivated by a very different set of negotiating conditions than the poor world. The template for the former being the implementation of a non-binding arrangement that the poor were urged to sign up to. This explains why, for example, the U.S. was able to put on the table a very small number, 3% cut in emissions below 1990 levels, when it needed to cut 40% or more. The next major conference that promised much but delivered nothing was the Paris Conference in 2015, COP21. Former NASA scientist James Hansen, I've talked about him, I showed the video with his granddaughter the other day, remarked that the discussions were a fraud and a fake. And Guy McPherson says it, and so do a lot of others. He added, it's just bullshit for them to say, oh, we'll have a 2-degree warming target and then try to do a little better every 5 years. It's just worthless words because there's no action, just promises. Meanwhile, the United States used the fact that it hadn't ratified any human rights statute internationally as a poison divide and rule pill against developing countries. The aim was to pick off the most vulnerable as their justification for shifting blame for the crisis onto the smaller nations. Wow, what an article. Kenyan political ecologist Ruth Nyambura summed up the impasse well when she said, "We want to get out of this sinking ship, but countries like the U.S. are holding lifeboats. They're holding lifeboats. We're holding the lifeboats." Do you know how much they hate the United States now? And especially with 45? The settlement that emerged in Paris was extremely weak, due largely to negotiated consensual interplay between the most powerful players. This meant they were able to use each other to take things off the table they didn't want. This interplay, to a great extent, was determined by the influence the oil, coal, and gas companies had on the proceedings, as well as the banks, hedge funds, and other financial institutions who fund them. They wrote the Paris Agreement. They did. Okay? The giant corporations garner an enormous amount of power in terms of their ability to be able to influence the decision-making process of the most powerful governments. This often takes the form of lobbying of leading politicians of these governments by the giant corporations. Conflict of interest issues remained a feature in Paris. Did anybody know this? I knew it, but I still didn't want him to pull out because I thought it really looked awful to the rest of the world, and it still does. So the potential for corruption was as strong as ever, aided ostensibly by credible figures who misrepresented consensus research. Those involved in the scandal included climate change professors who Greenpeace exposed as individuals who were willing to produce pro-fossil fuel industry research by concealing the source of their funding. Corruption abounds. The rejection of legitimate climate science research also extended to corporate Main Street journalists like Christopher Booker and James Delingpool, whose roles are little more than conduits for the kinds of power they are supposed to hold to account. The leverage that climate change denying journalists and powerful corporate lobbyists, say Koch brothers, former politicians, and others within the denial industry, and it's a freaking industry, just watch Fox News on any day of the week, are able to exert in order to deceive and mislead the public regarding the science cannot be underestimated. One such figure is journalist Peter Hitchens, who ought to know better. The writer, who has many credible and sensible things to say about the conflict in Syria, apparently bases his authority to deny the reality of climate change on misleading glacier figures published by the Science and Environmentally Policy Project, SEPP, run by a discredited environmental scientist called Dr. Fred Singer. That's Fred Singer. The data has been reproduced by several other groups and has also found its way into the Washington Post. Oh, according to George Monbiot, who I love, who we post on the Environmental Coffeehouse, the figures which were published by these groups were subsequently used by Hitchens, as well as other notable denialists like Melanie Phillips and David Bellamy to support their respective positions. However, the groups have one thing in common. They have all been funded by Exxon. First person I'm going to sue. But this fact has not initiated any retractions. On the contrary, it has resulted in the digging in of heels. The intention is to create confusion and the impression of an uncertainty within the scientific community. So even Exxon, the science is settled, even Exxon's own research conducted decades ago that was until recently covered up confirmed the role of fossil fuels in global warming. Despite this, the damage has arguably already been done. Governments can only ameliorate the worst effects of runaway climate change. This author thinks it's too late to stop it in its tracks. As the consequences of climate change feedback begin to take their toll, we will soon be reaching the tipping point. And this will almost certainly be hastened by U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Accord. If by 2030 carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere remain as high as they are today, then ecosystems will begin to release the carbon dioxide as opposed to absorbing it. Don't you love when they talk about these things that they need as mitigation measures, like these, figuratively big vacuums of carbon dioxide, CO2. Let's vacuum it out of the atmosphere. Let's not stop doing what's causing it. Let's just vacuum it out. Oh, God. Well, at this point, climate change will not only be out of our hands, but it will accelerate without our help. With our dependency on fossil fuels, it's our fault because I am still driving a fossil fuel vehicle, continuing to increase year on year, it appears that this scenario will indeed come to pass. The complicit role denialists like Hitchens and Bellamy played in it must never be forgiven. Now this guy, he has a donation paste. I like this. Wow, this was good. I want to go back, though, and say his name again. I loved it. Daniel Margrain. I loved it. Cultureandpolitics.org. Daniel Margrain. Holy shit, what an article. I could not have written that any better. Okay, let's go and over some comments. Joanne says plant trees everywhere. Oh, yeah. When our trees are all taken, all the big ones, the artist came today. He's going to take some. He says we have cherry, and he's going to make a table, and he's going to make some art pieces and some instruments. We're going to plant trees. And, oh, wow, there was a lot of comments I missed. Joanne says, again, wake up to the reality. Our government is a corrupt military-industrial complex. Yeah, who doesn't know that? My God. Let's see. Kim said... oh, yeah, we were talking before, and Marcella was here, and she said, hi, Steve and Sandy. I didn't get a chance to say everybody, hi, because I've been so involved in reading this and, talking about this to you. I'm looking at your comments. I don't want you to get upset if I don't have you up there. I do love to put up the comments. Coral reefs are drying. Permafrost is melting. And underneath that permafrost is bacteria and disease that we don't have, we might not have any cure for. But, I'll tell you what, the oligarchy and the rich people don't give a shit because they want us all to die anyway. They do. That's why they're, Mitch McConnell is pushing so hard. And Paul Ryan, oh, he made a faux pas. Oh, boy. If you can find that little clip of him saying how he wants to, how they want about the killing off of Americans. I don't remember it verbatim. I heard it today. If I can find it, I'll put it up on Environmental Coffeehouse. Oh my God, what a Freudian slip, but it was so real.
This to us is something that we're not going to give up on, because we're not going to give up on destroying the healthcare system for the American people.
I mean, they want to kill us. That's how I feel. If I don't have the insurance that I have right now, my husband would be dead. You know who I feel bad about? Of course, I've got a 28-year-old daughter. My Roger at Environmental Coffeehouse is 27. Look what we've done. What have we done? But of course, I always say, fight, fight, fight. Right? That we fight. And we never give up. Guy McPherson might say we have till what, 2025? Others may say longer. That doesn't mean we change our lives and say, oh my God, I'm going to be a fat slob. Do nothing, eat, drink beer. No, it means we get politically involved and we reach one and teach one and we get others politically involved. Like I did that young woman at the hospital who had not a freaking clue. Not a clue. 4 kids at 32, not a clue anything was going on. Never even registered to vote. But she will now. That can work with me on tornadoes and why these may have happened, because I do think it's a link to climate change. I cannot think anything different. I just can't. And if you think you live in somewhere safe like I did, bullshit. We're not. We're going to keep on fighting. We're going to keep on working. And those kids that are in those camps that are fighting the fossil fuel industry, right on. I say all the kids that can do this should do it. Fight. Fight for their future. Fight against those that are taking their future away. Fight against like the CPV plant in Minisink that Roger's doing. Just do it. We need to have a culture of activists, no matter what abrupt climate change is going to herald in. Oh, I would love to see them sued all the time. Okay. Well, I am not joking. I told my husband, he doesn't think I'm nuts. For once. Maybe it's the medicine he's on. Well, anyway, guys, I love you. So that is really what I have tonight. Peace. Please share this.